Hello everyone. Today we will discuss one of the most important topic in the subject discourse analysis. Knowledge in discourse. In knowledge in discourse, we'll be focusing on knowledge structure. In discourse analysis, we call it schemata. So what is schemata? The structure of knowledge in our mind. And at the end of lecture, we will also discuss evidence of schemata. What are the proofs or what is the evidence that there is structure of knowledge in our mind? Let's begin our today's lecture. Knowledge of schemata. Our world knowledge and social knowledge is crucial for the production and understanding of discourse. So we have world knowledge, what's going on in the world, because if we are living in this world, so we have world knowledge. Plus we have social knowledge. So there are different social practices which are practiced in different society. So in which society we are living, so we will have the social knowledge of that society. For example, if there is like a wedding ceremony, or if there's like a something like funeral, or if there is like a somebody dies, right, or somebody is getting married. So these are different like social practices. So we, on the one hand, we have social knowledge, and on the other hand, we have world knowledge. So in order to understand discourse and to communicate effectively, right? So we operate world knowledge and we operate social knowledge. So our world knowledge and social knowledge is crucial for the production and understanding of discourse. We cannot produce a discourse, right, if there is no world knowledge, or we cannot understand a discourse if you don't have world knowledge. And similarly, we cannot produce and we cannot interpret a discourse if you don't have social knowledge, or we don't know the social knowledge. So social knowledge plus world knowledge both are important for the production and interpretation of discourse. So for effective communication to occur, it is necessary that the receiver have enough prior knowledge, right? So the receiver have, if I assume that the receiver doesn't have like prior knowledge, then I will communicate him or her differently. Or if I know that the person I am communicating, he or she has a prior knowledge of the topic, of the subject that we are discussing, then I'll communicate differently, right? So the sender correctly judge the extent of that knowledge. So for example, that I am a sender and you are a receiver. If I cannot judge properly my receiver, that whatever I say, that it will be communicated or it will be understood by my receiver, right? So it depends on me, right? It depends on like the speaker or the sender, that he or she should correctly judge whether my receiver will perceive the knowledge or the information I am conveying to him or not, right? This is important. Now, how our pre-existing knowledge of the world shapes the production and understanding of discourse attracted attention mostly due to the advent of artificial intelligence. You might know that artificial intelligence. For example, you go to YouTube, okay, or any social media platform, and once you check like an event or a personality, right, or a video, okay, you like something, you watch something, so then the computer will bring all relevant material in front of you, because from the knowledge, right, or like from the language you're giving there, for example, you're giving there some sentences, some words, some phrases, so that is knowledge. And the computer then judges, right, that what kind of things or activity the person is interested. So then all the relevant material or activity are brought forth in front of you, and then you watch. This is also artificial intelligence. So this like a structure of knowledge or schemata, it is like a motivated from artificial intelligence, right? The most important idea that came into discourse analysis from the field of artificial intelligence is discourse schemata. So, discourse schemata, right? This is the advent of artificial intelligence, right? You can see here that the most important idea that came into discourse analysis from the field of artificial intelligence is discourse schemata. So, discourse schemata or knowledge schemata is the result of artificial intelligence in discourse analysis. Schemata, what is schemata? So, schematas are network of stereotypical information about particular topics or theme. So we have like idea, right? So what is schemata? Mental representation, or schemata are network of stereotypical information, right? All will be the same, right? About particular topics or theme. For example, if I say that I wake up at 7 o'clock and then I leave to university at 8 o'clock, right? So everybody knows that if I wake up, then I go to washroom, I take a bath, right? Or I dress myself, okay? Or I take my breakfast and then I go to university. So even if I don't mention that I go to washroom, I take a bath, or I brush my hair and I dress myself, I check like the water, okay, in my car, or the oil in my car, and then I go to university, right? So even if I just say that I wake up at 7 o'clock and I leave to university at 8 o'clock, so all the things which I do not mention, my receiver perceive them. So I assume, okay, that what is left out would be understood to my receiver, right? So this is okay, like the definition and understanding of schemata. They're the structure of knowledge, because in our mind a knowledge is structure, okay? So schemata are network of stereotypical information about particular topics or theme. So you will understand this in a better way on coming slide. The main idea in schemata theory is that the mind, when stimulated by the keywords, phrases in a particular discourse, so there will be some keywords, some key phrases, and when the mind is stimulated by those words, sentences and phrases, right, in a particular discourse, or by the context in which these words are uttered, so activate existing knowledge schemata, what we have in mind, and makes sense of the new information. So something we have in mind, right? So because whatever we have in mind, like world knowledge and social knowledge, and what we see on the page, or somebody utters something, so on the one hand we have some words, sentences and phrases, or the context, and on the other hand we have a prior knowledge in our mind. So our prior knowledge is operated at its function, or it is activated because of some words, phrases and sentences which are uttered, right? And then we perceive new information on the basis of all information or all knowledge what we have in our mind, or that is stored in our mind, right? Now, three kinds of memories we have. One is called, according to some schemata theories, in the comprehension of both oral and written discourse, we have three kinds of memory. First, a surface representation is attained by breaking down into discourse into component and store in the short-term memory. And next, a mental representation of it is formed in the episodic memory. So episodic memory is second type of memory. And finally, a conceptual model is formed and integrated into long-term memory as scripts or schemata. So this is third type of memory. So what happens in the first case, that a surface representation is attained, what is uttered or what is said, right? This is surface representation. It is attained by breaking down the discourse into component, and this surface representation is broken down into component into different parts and stored in the short-term memory. So this is called short-term memory, right? When the component of discourse is broken down and is stored in a short-term memory, and this is what this is the surface representation, what is uttered or what is said. Next, a mental representation of it is formed into episodic memory. Now this is episodic memory which stays there for a little bit long time, right? And finally, a conceptual model is formed and integrated into long-term memory as scripts or schemata. And then for it is stored in our mind for a long time. Okay? What we observe, what we see. First, that is like a surface representation, and then it turns into episodic memory, and then finally it turns into long-term memory, and then such kind of world knowledge and social knowledge that is stored in our mind. And when a new information we confront into new information, so we mobilize, we utilize whatever is already stored in our mind. So in order to understand new information, we utilize or we activate our world knowledge and social knowledge, what is stored in our mind, what we have already stored there, right? Now you will understand this structured knowledge or schemata by giving example. Story as an example. Now Mahir or Mahir is often late to school. This is situation, right? That Mahir or Mahir is often late to school. Today, a supervisor asked him why he was late to school. So often, and he said he didn't know. He didn't know, right? Because supervisor tells him that he was late to school so often, and he said he didn't know. According to Mahir, every morning he comes straight to school and yet he is late, right? This is his response, that every morning he comes straight to school and he is late. So the supervisor asked him to tell her everything he did since he got up until he left for school, and this is what he said. So this is now what like Mahir is saying to his supervisor. This is very interesting. You will understand now schemata. He says that I got up at 6:30, right? I got up at 6:30. Now got ready. Mom made me a sandwich and a glass of juice. I watched a few minutes of Handu. So Hanhinu is like a TV program. Then I left for school at around 6:50. You see that this person or Mahir is leaving out a lot of things, and Mahir is assuming that what he leaves out would be understood by his supervisor. I got up at 6:30, right, and got ready. So what happened between 6:30, got up and got ready? So there happened a lot of things. For example, going to washroom, right, using like a toilet or like a towel, right, dressing yourself. So a lot of things happen here. But Mahir assumes that whatever he leaves out would be understood by supervisor, right? So this is called like, because the supervisor has like schemata, world knowledge, social knowledge, that what happened, okay, because when a person gets up, so obviously a person goes to washroom, right? Most often he goes to washroom, so that is understood. And then mummy made me a sandwich, but he didn't say that he ate the sandwich. Mummy made me a sandwich. It is assumed by Mahir that supervisor would understand that he also ate a sandwich, because here he doesn't say that, he said that mom made me a sandwich, and he doesn't say that he ate a sandwich. Here is a question. Is this advocate information for the supervisor? So it may be advocate in the case if the supervisor and Mahir, they share social, cultural and world knowledge. Then the supervisor will understand that what happens between 6:30 by the time that Mahir got up and got ready, right? What happens here? And the supervisor that he knows, right? According to Mahir assumed the supervisor knows what happened between got ready and mom made me a sandwich. And then when Mahir said that mom made me a sandwich, so Mahir knows, okay, that supervisor will assume that he also ate a sandwich, right? So this will be then advocate information for the supervisor, and it will not be advocate information for the supervisor if the Mahir, the person here we talking, and the supervisor, they do not share social, cultural and world knowledge, or if there is no schemas, there is no what we have like background knowledge, or like the world knowledge, social knowledge, there is no schemata. If there is no schemata, no schema, then it would be problem. And then Mahir will explain everything from 6:30 to 6:50, whatever happens, minute detail, right? Let's proceed on lecture. Or would it more appropriate if Mahir had said, okay, if Mahir had said to his supervisor his daily routine that I woke up at about 6:20, I opened my eyes. So when you wake up, so of course you open your eyes. So opening eye, that is understood because the supervisor has schemata, schemas in mind, world knowledge, that a person can wake up only when a person wakes up, so then a person open also eyes. It is understood, right? A bit, and then close them again, right? And lay in the bed for about 10 more minutes. But these are unnecessary information, so they are not needed, and they are understood. Then I threw back the quilt and sit up across leg on the bed. After a few seconds, I got out of bed and walked towards the towel rack. I took my towel and walked to the toilet. Then I opened the door and walked in. I took my toothbrush and put some toothpaste on it. Then I brushed my teeth for about a minute and so and rinse my mouth. Then, right, this is okay. What happened after that? After that, I put on my uniform and left for school. So, when Mahir says he left for school, does he live to tell us that he put on his uniform? Why this is, right? When Mahir say that after that, I put on my uniform and I left for school. Why Mahir said that he left for school? Does he have tell us that he put on his uniform? Why? He doesn't need to tell, okay, because by the time you're leaving for school, so of course you will wear uniform. So you will wear uniform. How I know? Or how a supervisor knows that he wears uniform. So that is world knowledge, because in world knowledge we know when a person goes to school, so he wears uniform, right? So no need to say that I wear uniform, because if you're going to school, so you will uniform. So that is understood. So this is like elaborated, and it will happen only when there is no shared social, culture, and world knowledge. There is no schemata. Then you will have to explain. Otherwise, we speak and we talk in this way, right? Because everybody, whenever you communicate someone, so you know that you share some knowledge, world knowledge, social knowledge, cultural knowledge, and then you speak according to them. And when a person utters your word that is spoken or written, so what happens, the person world knowledge and social knowledge, or his schemata or her schemata, is activated, and through that social and cultural knowledge he or she understand what you says or what you have written. Now, when Mahir tells us that he got up and got ready, we assume that he must have got up to the bed. So that is assumptions. And clean up and change into school clothes, also we know. So this is okay, assumptions, right? Okay, this is world knowledge. Because when a person say that got out of the bed, when a person says, okay, Mahir, that he got up and got ready, so according to world knowledge and social knowledge, we assume that he must have got out of bed, because when you go to ready to the school, so you got up the bed, clean up, and of course you have clean up yourself and change into school clothes. So this is because we have knowledge of a typical getting ready for school and can therefore fill in the missing detail. This is okay, well, what we call getting ready. Now, this pre-existing knowledge can be called a getting ready schemata. Okay, getting ready schemata, because we have pre-existing knowledge about something. When a sender knows that a receiver's schema to be similar to his own or a significant degree, then he needs to mention only features that are not contained in it. For example, when he got up, what he had for breakfast, etc., because that is a shared knowledge. And other feature, for example, getting out of the bed and putting on the school uniform will be assumed unless otherwise told, right? So that is, if that is not assumed, then you're going to tell, and if that is assumed, no need to tell, okay, that I wear uniform of school. Now, some more examples and explanation from Guy Cook Discourse book. How mental schemata operate in discourse productions and comprehension is best illustrated by an example. Imagine a witness in court case is asked to tell the court about her movement during this morning. So she's asked to tell them everything, the whole truth. She began as follows. I woke up at 7:40. I made some toast and a cup of tea. I listened to the news and I left for the work at about 8:30. So what happens between I woke up at 7:40, I made some toast? What happened between this one and this one? The person, the witness is not telling, because that is assumed. Second, that I made some toast, so the person is not saying that I ate toast, but it is assumed that if you made a toast, so you will also eat the toast. Similarly, you can see that a cup of tea. So a person is saying that I made some toast and a cup of tea, but not saying that he drank the tea or he ate the toast, but that is assumed by the court, by the judge. And I listened to the news and I left for the work at about 8:30. So because the judge and the person, the witness, has schemata of the world knowledge, social knowledge, that what happened if a person say that I made some toast and a cup of tea, so of course you ate also toast and you also drank the tea. Now, such a description might well be enough to satisfy the court. Now, but suppose the witness had said, if a witness had said in this way, I woke up at 7:40, I was in bed, I was wearing pajamas, right? After laying still for a few minutes, I threw back the door, got out of the bed, walked to the door of the bedroom, opened the door, switch on the landing light, right? And walk across the landing, open the bathroom door, went into the bathroom, put the basin plug into a plug hole, turn on the hot tap, rain some hot water into the wash basin, and then look in the mirror. So these all things are assumed, and a person is not supposed to say these all things in detail, according to world knowledge. Now we will discuss on this slide that evidence for schemata. So there is much evidence that the mind does use knowledge schemata in interpreting discourse, right? So there is what? Much evidence that how the mind does use knowledge schemata in interpreting discourse. When you have a discourse, though, how a mind interpret the discourse, so there is evidence. For example, first, one piece of evidence is the fact that when questions about a particular discourse or asked to recall it, very often we fill in detail which were not actually given, right? So first, when question is asked about a particular discourse or asked to recall it, what happened? So very often we fill the detail we have, okay, which were not actually given. For example, that here we have a detail and these details are not given, right? So we have only this one. I woke up at 7:40, I made some toast and cup of tea, I listened to the news, and I left for work at about 8:30. Right? So this is the first event, okay, by the time we are asked, so our world knowledge and social knowledge is activated and we remember all these details. So this is the first evidence. And evidence for schemata, the second one, another piece of evidence is the use of the definite article in certain cases. For example, is I was already running late, right? I call a taxi, but the taxi driver took so long to find our place that I was late for work anyway. You can see that as I was already running late, I called a taxi, but the taxi took so long. So why? Because the taxi driver took so long. Why I'm mentioning the taxi driver for the first time, and I am using here a definite article the. So there is no need of the. Then why I'm using the before taxi driver? Because for the first time because according to the rule, grammar rule, that when we are mentioning someone or something for the first time, so we don't use the, we use indefinite article a or in. But why the is used here? Because I call a taxi. So when I say I call a taxi, so of course that inside a taxi there will be a driver. So that's why that I use here that the person use here that the taxi driver, because you see that I call a taxi. So what is a taxi? A taxi doesn't come itself. There will be a driver. So a driver is here. So that's why that before the driver that the is used here. So what is the traditional use of different article the? So we use the when we are mentioning sometime for the second time, or something that is known. So here the taxi driver is not known, but we are using the. Why? Because we assume that if there is taxi, so there will be also driver. So why do we use the taxi driver here? That's explanation now. Even though that he is mentioned for the first time, it is appropriate to use the taxi driver here because our schemata for taxi contains a taxi driver. Because when we say that taxi, so our schemata, our world knowledge tells us that there will be also a driver. There will be taxi driver. That's why the is used here. Taxi contains a taxi driver, and therefore when someone talks about a taxi coming, we assume that it will have a driver. So our world knowledge, when somebody tells that a taxi is coming, so we assume that there will be also a taxi driver. So this is schemata, this is world knowledge. Some more example. One afternoon, a big wolf waited in a dark forest for a little girl to come along carrying a basket of food to her grandmother. Are you carrying the basket to your grandmother? Asked the wolf. So that is here the wolf is used for the second time. That's why the definite article the is used according to the rules of the grammar. The little girl said yes, she was. So the little girl is also used for the second time. That's why definite article the is used. So that is a little girl, and here wolf, a big wolf. So a big wolf became the wolf, and a little girl became the little girl according to the rules. Now, but none of the rules given in traditional grammar can explain the use of the definite article in an opening, such as, so we have another example. Here, the traditional, according to the traditional grammars of the rule, or the traditional grammar of the rule will not explain that why the definite article the is used here. For example, I was late and we decided to call a taxi. Unfortunately, the driver spent a long time finding our house. You can see here that I was late and we decided to call a taxi. Unfortunately, the driver is used here for the first time, but the different article the is used. We can see here that here a little girl is used for the second time. That's why the is used. And the wolf is used for the second time. That's why the is used. But here the driver is used for the first time and different article the is used. Why is it so? Right? Because we assume that if there is taxi, so there will be driver. Right? So our world knowledge tells us that a taxi would have inside also a driver. So a driver is assumed, right? And it is because world knowledge tells us, our schemata tell, because we have stored in our mind that a taxi cannot come itself, right? So there will be a driver. That's why we use here the driver. So here the use of the definite article with driver seems quite appropriate even though he is mentioned here for the first time. This is because our taxi schema contains a taxi driver. Because we have a schema of the taxi in our mind. And in our mind, the schema tells us if there is taxi, so there will be taxi driver also. A driver will be there in the taxi. And we assume that a taxi that arrives at our house has a driver. It is though it is as though he has already been mentioned, so we can test this by considering an alternative opening. We can say I was late and we decided to call a taxi. Unfortunately, the retired admiral spent a long time finding our house. So again you can see that here that the retired admiral is used for the first time. But again, the is used because the retired admiral was the person who was driving the taxi. Now, it might be the case that the taxi driver is a retired admiral, but we are unlikely to assume without evidence because we don't have evidence whether this retired admiral is a taxi or a driver or not, right? So we don't have evidence. If we don't have evidence, then we will elaborate. For example, that our receiver here we have, but we are unlikely to assume without evidence that our receiver already knows this. Here in this example, we know that our receiver knows that if there's taxi, there will be driver. But here we do not know whether our receiver will understand or not that retired admiral is a driver. So this word need to say so I was late and we decided to call a taxi. The driver, as it turned out, was a retired admiral. You can see that the driver. So here driver is used for the first time, but we know that if there is a taxi, so there will be a driver. And if you want to explain the retired admiral, then we will say, and it turned out was a retired admiral. So here when a retired admiral is used for the first time, so we are using A because our receiver doesn't know whether retired admiral is a driver or not. So here we say the driver was a turnout, the driver was a turnout. We got no. That the driver who was driving the taxi was a retired admiral, and unfortunately he spent a long time finding our home. So thank you so much. It was all about knowledge structure, schemata, that how knowledge is structured in our mind, right? And then we talked about that evidence of schemata, how we know, how can we test our schemata, right? And then we talked about that knowledge of schemata, that how social knowledge and world knowledge is important to interpret and produce discourse structure. We talked about different kinds of memory, that how like world knowledge and social knowledge is stored in our mind through different memories, right? We have like surface representation, then we have episodic memory, then we have permanent or long-term memory. And then we gave example that how discourse like structure or knowledge is structure, what we call schemata. And then we also provide evidence for schemata or proof for schemata. And we know this because whenever somebody asks us detail, so our world knowledge is operated and then we give detail. And then we talked about like second evidence for schemata is the definite article the, right? So thank you so much. It was all about today's lecture. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the channel, and please provide your valuable comment, and please forward and share this lecture with those that who want to attempt the exam or BS paper like the subject discourse analysis, because it is one of the topic of discourse analysis. So most of the students are going to appear in exam soon. So please share and with those students also that who are in dire need. Thank you so much.